Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be talking about some free agency losers for Dynasty Fantasy Football. And with us today is a special guest making his first time appearance with Front Office Pros, which is none other than Hutchinson Brown. He's a content creator at Footballguys and the co-host of Hooked on Fantasy. Hutchinson, thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Super excited. We're talking about some bummers, some free agency losers today. So it's not the best topic, but it's gonna be fun.
Hike.
I like it, Hutch. We'll stick with the free agency bummers. I can change the name of the episode here. So let's.
You can do that.
It seems to soften it up. But losers is a bit harsh, I think.
It is harsh. So give us your first loser there, Hutch.
So my first free agency loser or bummer, if you want to call it, I'm going to be talking about DeAndre Hopkins for a second here. So D-Hop, wide receiver of the Tennessee Titans. Last year on the Titans, he had a solid campaign, just over 1,000 yards on a lot of targets, 137 targets on the team. And Will Levis was struggling at quarterback. He was on and off. It was quite a weird season in the second half there for Will Levis. But D-Hop was able to come through with some volume and be able to produce solid fantasy points. But when you really look into it a little bit, like I went back and watched DeAndre Hopkins play, look more into the numbers. He had a bit of a down year. He really did. It wasn't the same. And when you look at his yards per catch numbers, when you look at his yards after catch numbers, he was kind of down here overall for his career. And at 31 years of age, and now they've brought in a wide receiver like Calvin Ridley and paid him $90+ million over the next 4 seasons. That just shows you one thing and one thing only, is that the Titans are not 100% confident that DeAndre Hopkins will be their wide receiver one. If they were confident that DeAndre Hopkins could be their wide receiver one, they would bring in somebody like Gabe Davis or Marquise Brown, somebody that's a little fringe as a wide receiver one or more of a wide receiver two type, and not someone that would actually demand a wide receiver one role like Calvin Ridley. I mean, he had 1,000+ yards last year with Jacksonville. We know it was inconsistent for fantasy, but he really was open a lot on the field. And there were just times where Trevor Lawrence completely missed him, or there were times where it was literally just 1 foot in bounds away from a touchdown. There were so many of those plays last year. I remember against the Chiefs, it was 3 different plays where it was 1 foot not in bounds for the touchdown. It was just a ridiculous game, that game, but that happened all season too. But I expect Calvin Ridley to have a really big impact on this offense, and I honestly expect him to be the wide receiver one. So DeAndre Hopkins off a bit of a down year at 31 years of age, now with signing Calvin Ridley, the Titans are showing us that they do not have tons of confidence in Hopkins. So Hopkins is a big loser for me in free agency.
Now, I'm a little interested to kind of push back on that a little bit. You saw Hopkins and Levis have I feel, a decent amount of connection, especially with the first game of Levis against the Falcons. You saw he threw a couple long balls his way. You just feel that the optics, I'll put it, of what they're giving Calvin Ridley, you just believe that there's going to be a downtick in involvement in the offense.
Correct. Yeah. Hopkins and Levis showed a solid connection last year, but I feel like people overhype that one game where he had 4 touchdowns, because the rest of the season, Levis was kind of okay. When you look at the numbers and you watch him play, he was fine, but he wasn't great. That one game really highlighted his season and took it to a level where he's kind of overrated a little bit as it has his rookie season. He was okay the rest of the rookie season. He was fine. And Hopkins was fine for fantasy. But that one game is overhyped a lot. So I would say I think Ridley coming in just shows a lot about how they feel about Hopkins. Yeah.
So do you really think Calvin Ridley can be the wide receiver one? Because he was
very confident, yes.
Because he was best when Zay Jones and Christian Kirk were out there, and kind of that wide receiver 3 for Jacksonville. His best games were when he was a wide receiver 3. When Zay Jones was hurt, he kind of went down because they said he wasn't just meant for that kind of role in their offense. I mean, maybe Jacksonville's offense will be different, and he won't necessarily need to be that Z wide receiver.
I mean, he was always the target leader. They were giving him tons of targets. Sometimes they just didn't come through because of Trevor Lawrence. There were just games where he was off. I mean, it's his first game back. First season back from football, after the whole gambling situation, mental health situation, after the suspension, all of that crap. He came back first season. And honestly, there were plenty of moments where he was like, that dude is a wide receiver one in the NFL. That dude can do it. Zay Jones and Christian Kirk were great. They had certain points this year where they were good. But I think when you look at the season as a whole, Ridley was the wide receiver one in that offense.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think on the onset, I definitely hear what you're saying. I think if I'm hearing Joe's line of questioning with my line of questioning, I think Calvin Ridley is not one of my losers, but I would maybe lean towards him more so than Hopkins, because I think the hype might be there for Ridley, and I don't know if it's deserved.
That's fair enough. Yeah, I'm not saying Ridley's going to be a superstar, because we have a lot of questions about Will Levis. But him and but adding a wide receiver like Ridley on the contract they added him on is just has to be a statement towards Hopkins after a down season he had or after a weird season he had, saying we're not sure he can be our wide receiver one. If they really thought he could be their dominant wide receiver one for Will Levis, they would have brought in somebody that was less threatening.
Do you think it could be more of an indictment on Treylon Burks, though?
Oh yeah, totally. I almost wrote Treylon Burks down as my.
I know you were waffling on that one. I didn't know which one you were going to say.
Yeah, I was back and forth on that one because Treylon Burks kind of gets destroyed in fantasy football, but he was after a down second year again. He was kind of already dead in the water already. It was just a matter of time before he was officially dead with us signing like this. But I think this really impact. I think his really impact goes further than Burks, and it goes to Hopkins as well.
So, Joe, who do you got as your free agency loser?
Yeah, for my first free agency loser, going to go with quarterback Justin Herbert. He's losing his best wide receiver, Keenan Allen. Also, they got rid of Mike Williams. There is potential they bring him back for a reunion, but I'm not so sure that's going to happen. Also losing Gerald Everett, the standout running back, and Austin Eckler as well. Losing a lot of weapons, and then also not to mention Jim Harbaugh coming over as the coach. I know at first I was kind of like, it could do a lot, but I really think it's going to negatively impact Herbert for fantasy just because they're going to be that run-first offense. He's not going to be asked to do as much. Passing volume's just not going to be there as we've come accustomed to the last few years.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, even when you look back to Harbaugh, he worked with Stanford with Andrew Luck back in the day. And even that offense was very run heavy. That offense was really run heavy. Like Harbaugh, it doesn't matter which quarterback you give him, he's a run heavy offense guy. And it's clear with his moves, moving away Gerald Everett, moving away Keenan Allen, moving away Mike Williams. I mean, those guys all had decent cap hits, especially Williams and Keenan Allen. They were the two highest cap hits in the NFL at wide receiver, so they had to do something. Mike Williams' cut was an easy one, but Keenan Allen trade actually kind of shocked me a little bit. But I would completely agree. This is a big loss for Herbert. I think at 6, though, they're going to draft somebody. I mean, they have all the access in the world to draft Bowers or Neighbors or even Marvin Harrison Jr. if he slips past 4 and 5. That's a potential outcome there as well. He's going to have a wide receiver one between one of those 3 guys. He's going to have a great receiving option. But again, I would agree with you. Herbert definitely lost this offseason so far.
I think it's important that we try to, even though, obviously we get caught up in all the moves that are happening surrounding the Chargers, especially. I find myself, I guess, even with the masses being caught up with maybe Justin Herbert will possibly get traded too. But I mean, if you look at his contract, it literally cannot happen.
No,
like he has $129 million in dead cap. If they went ahead and tried to trade this guy before June 1st, you're talking about a negative $89 million in negative cap savings. So that would be breaking the Broncos record for Russell Wilson.
Russell Wilson was 85 dead cap this year.
So, it's just not. Even if Harbaugh wanted it to happen, I don't think it's going to happen. It doesn't preclude him from taking J.J. McCarthy if he wants to. Don't know why. I don't think it's a smart move, but Jim will do his own thing. But it's interesting you say this, Joe, because you said he was a buyer. You were buying him not too long ago in our moves to make. He was the guy that you were buying, but now based on what's happened, you're selling.
Yeah, I was thinking because at first it was just, Harbaugh's coming in there. He's like the quarterback guru. He's going to get the most out of him. But I just think potentially there's that passing volume going down for Herbert is going to potentially be a negative for him. And then now losing the weapons and the guys he's had rapport with is just another negative. And I understand, they'll get him weapons, whether it's a Brock Bowers or another wide receiver in this draft, but it's going to still take some time to get that trust factor. You saw Quentin Johnston really struggle in his rookie year to kind of develop and be that someone. But I do think, though, this wide receiver class is a lot better than what Quentin Johnston's got to offer.
Hutch, would you say buy, sell, hold right now for Herbert? I mean, this is an interesting kind of conundrum that owners are in because if the writing's on the wall, it would tell you that the team is changing. He's not going to have as many weapons.
Yeah, I think, with the consensus thinking that, I think you have to hold Justin Herbert because obviously everyone's thinking sell, sell, sell. But at that point, you're selling at his lowest cost. You don't want to sell at your lowest cost in Dynasty. There are certain situations where you can, but in this situation with this high level of a player, selling at his lowest cost is just not the best option. You have to hold on because we know Herbert is a very talented quarterback who can stretch the ball downfield. And as much as Harbaugh wants to run the ball, he has a franchise level quarterback in Justin Herbert who can sling it down the field. They're going to have to get him some level of weapons. They're going to have to let him throw the ball somewhat. So he will be a relevant quarterback in fantasy. And I feel like a lot of people, if you're trying to trade away Justin Herbert in Dynasty, are going to just pay attention and hyper focus on the moves that are made this offseason, which is fair. But you're just never going to get the price you want for Herbert if you're trying to sell him. So I would hold. And if someone is panicking enough, you could buy him because I truly believe in the talent still. The moves they're making are concerning, but his talent is undeniable. And it's something that wins out a lot in Dynasty. Talent wins out a lot of the time.
I do hear what you're saying, and I tend to agree, but I think there is, looking back at the principle of economics, there is a principle of a sunk cost. And I think at some point there might be a value to say, will Herbert ever be the guy that we saw him in those first 2 or 3 years? And is it better off to be able to see if you can't get something for him? People are saying, hey, this is an interesting buy option. Could you get some draft capital? Obviously, it has to depend on what they're willing to offer. You're not going to give them up for like a third-round pick or something like that.
Because, I mean, at this point, I feel like I understand anything can happen in the draft, but if the Chargers seriously don't draft one of the 3 of Brock Bowers, Malik Neighbors, or Marvin Harrison Jr. in the draft, I would be floored. I would be completely floored. And I feel like no matter what, whether one of those 3 guys gets drafted, everyone's going to be talking about, oh, it's the Herbert Bowers combo. It's going to be elite, and everyone's going to be back in on Herbert again. So I feel like now, honestly, you just want to hold, don't want to sell, because I think the Chargers, when they draft whoever they're going to draft, it's going to rise Herbert stock no matter what.
So let's talk about another quarterback, and I think this is the obvious loser here, guys, but it's going to be quarterback Justin Fields. He was traded not for a 2024 pick, mind you. He got traded for a 2025 6th-round pick that could become a 4th-round pick if he plays over 51% of the snaps. Now, the Steelers did inherit Fields' contract, so the Steelers are going to have a decision to make pretty closely after the draft whether or not they're going to accept the 5th-year option, and I'm here to tell you they're not. So that means that he's going to be a free agent next year, which who knows what's going to happen to him. Does he stick back with the Steelers? Is he going to get any playing time? They're already talking about the possibility, does Russ get a multi-year extension? So, I mean, right now we're talking the Fields' value is absolutely cratered. So I think we all would agree that he's a loser. I guess I'd be more curious as far as, what do you think his value is now? I mean, I'm assuming, knowing what you just said about Herbert, Hutch, I'm thinking you're also going to hold on Fields.
I would also hold on Fields, yes, because at this point, everyone's assuming that not everyone, but there are a good amount of people out there that are assuming that he's probably the backup to Russell Wilson to start the season. And while that is most definitely a possibility, absolutely a possibility, they're paying, Russ is getting paid decent. Actually, no, he's only getting paid $1.2 million by the Steelers, but they traded. It was basically the same deal as the Dallas deal when they traded for Trey Lance. Like, that was essentially the deal. It was very close to that kind of value. And Trey Lance, we know, is just a backup to Dak right now. And Fields, it could very well be the same. But honestly, I'm looking at it this way. I think Russ will start the season, but he will not end it. I think Fields will start the season the rest of the way. And I think at that point, the Steelers will have to make a decision. Are we going to give Justin Fields a contract? Are we going to let him start next year? Or are we going to let him go and also let Russ go? Because Russ is also, I believe, on a 1-year deal. They could let him go after this year if they wanted to. So and also you talked about the specific in the trade. They get a 4th-round pick in 2025 instead of a 6th if he plays 51% of the snaps. So clearly there's a certain incentive to see if he were to play, you might get a better pick. So I'm thinking that Fields at least starts games this year. And I feel like at that point his value is just going to go up, because when he's on the field, we know he's a great fantasy asset. He may not be a great quarterback, but because of his running, he's a great fantasy asset no matter what when he's on the field. So once he gets on the field starting, his value will go up. And right now, most people assume that he's not going to start. So I'm holding Fields if I have him. And honestly, if I'm looking around and people are panicking, I'm willing to buy too. I've seen him go for like a second, like a late second, and I'm willing to pay that price for him.
Interesting.
What do you think, Joe?
Well, I agree. I think you do have to hold him, because it's going to be the price is going to be too low to sell him, and I would just hold him in the chance. I mean, like whether or not he plays in Pittsburgh, I'm not as confident in his Hutch that he actually gets to start any games this upcoming year. But Steelers aren't going to pick up that 5th-year option, so it's very likely that Fields could hit free agency next year as well. And then maybe he's a more interesting, or maybe they decide to not. Even though they're talking about already extending Russ after this season, maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe Steelers like to move forward with Fields based on what they see. Who knows? But I think you just hold him for now, and then in the hopes that his value soon enough jumps up to where you could sell him.
See, I have a lot more confidence in Russ than you guys, believe it or not. I'm not so sure that Fields is just gonna, get this opportunity. I think that at this point, if someone were to offer me an early second for Fields, I would highly consider it. I think that when it comes down to my view is you're hoping that he eventually has a resurgence like Baker Mayfield has had. That's kind of your hope. Now, mind you, he does have the rushing upside, but do I ever think that Fields is ever going to be, there was some, maybe not this past year, but I think it was the prior year, or I'm maybe getting my years mixed, but some were thinking he was going to be a top 5 quarterback. I didn't feel that, but I almost felt swayed by the masses to be like, well, I feel like I have to at least cater to this guy that he could do that. But I don't know. Arthur Smith is the offensive coordinator, which obviously he didn't throw the ball that much. Right now, you've only got George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth. You're telling me you don't have a loony Steelers fan in your league that you can't reach out? I mean, if you're a Steelers fan, they're probably like, oh, Justin Fields, he's going to be amazing. I feel like you might be able to get something out of that Steelers fan.
Yeah, I think it's just tough because right now he's blocked by Russell Wilson, though. I feel like that's kind of a tough selling point.
I just don't think Russ is going to last long, though. Russ, we watched him for 2 years in Denver, and he never figured it out. He never did. When you watch the film, when you watch him play, I get that he threw some touchdowns this past year. Sutton caught a ton of them. When you watch the film this past year, it was not good. He just is not. Yeah. He's not that dude anymore. I don't think he'll last long in Pittsburgh with those weapons.
He just wasn't meant to be there with Sean Payton, though. And Sean Payton tried to meld something together to get Sean Payton to run, where I think he fits perfectly with what Arthur Smith wants to do. They're going to run the ball a ton, hit the play action, and I think the system's going to fit Russell Wilson a lot better. And I think he's got some more longevity with the Steelers than and I think he'll look better than what he did in the Broncos uniform.
All right, Hutch, who do you got as your second loser here?
So my second loser of free agency has to be Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard was a big loser this free agency this offseason. I mean, when you look at the situation he had in Dallas, I mean, he had arguably a top 5 offensive line, a great quarterback in Dak Prescott, and arguably a top 10 offense in the NFL. This offense was fantastic and it was great. And not this past year, but 2 years ago, he was a fantastic fantasy ball running back with Zeke in the backfield. And then when Zeke left, everyone was concerned, like, oh, is he really able to take that next step and be that workhorse back? Some people believed it. Some people didn't. I really did not believe it. I was not on Tony Pollard. And for most of the season, that served to be correct. I mean, he was kind of injured this season, but even when you look at his healthy games, there were plenty of times where it was like, he just doesn't look good. Like, he just did not look good at all last year. Even the games where he was fully healthy, where he was apparently fully healthy, as some people say, he didn't look good. He just didn't. And now he's going to an offense where we have a big concern at quarterback with Will Levis. We have no idea who that is. We have no idea who he's going to be in his second season. An offensive line that's arguably bottom 5 in the National Football League. And a questionable receiving room with Calvin Ridley, who, was on and off last year. DeAndre Hopkins, who I mentioned earlier, had a down year this past year, 31 years of age. And now he's stuck with Tyjae Spears, who also is a great pass catcher. We love Tony Pollard in Dallas because he was working with Zeke, who was not a great pass catcher, at least not at that stage of his career. Tony Pollard was a much better pass catcher. And now he's in an offense with Spears, who's a very similar running back. Get him in open space, let him go, but he's not the best in between the tackles. And it's not going to work. These two guys are both going to be really gross for fantasy. It's going to be a really weird split. And I'm going to be honest, based on watching Spears and watching Pollard last year, I was more impressed watching Spears. I would not be surprised if by the end of the season, even with the money Pollard's being paid, if Spears was the lead back of the team. Maybe not workhorse, but at least the 1A. I would not be shocked by that at all. So Pollard is a big loser for me.
Sounds like a lot of ick that you're feeling over there, Hutch. Here's the thing. You're not going to have any I'm not going to disagree with you at all on this one. Joe knows I have not been a Pollard fan from the beginning. This guy, I believe this past season was the first time he cracked over 200 carries, and it was just by a smidge. He's just a guy that people got way too excited about because Ezekiel Elliott left. That void was there. They thought that he was just going to take over and be the workhorse back, and he's just not that type of running back. So I think that hopefully you took advantage and sold this guy, because I'm with you. It's a head-scratching move to me. Why would you have two of the same style running backs? Joe, we talked about that when the news first broke. You and I were talking about it. I was just like, what are the Titans doing bringing in the same type of running back?
Yeah. I'm frankly still confused about it, and I agree with Hutchinson as
crazy.
well.
Yeah.
The fact that Tajay Spears, no doubt, looked like a better back than Tony Pollard last year. Just the explosiveness that he had and everything, and it just doesn't make sense. Like you said, they have the exact same tool set and the strengths, and then yet they're in the same backfield on the same team with some bad offensive line play and a questionable quarterback.
Yeah, it was probably the most confusing signing, like you mentioned. It just didn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to Tennessee for me at all to pay big money to a running back. It just doesn't make sense to me. And it was just such a, like, honestly, I still don't understand why the Titans would do it, because he doesn't fit with Tajay Spears. It's not a good fit, and it's just not good for their team. Like, they don't need to sign that big time running back right now. That's just not what they need right now. I was genuinely just so confused by that. It really, really shocked me when that broke through. Most confusing signing of the offseason, probably for me.
So, Joe, who do you have as your second loser?
Yeah, I'm going to stay at the running back position. I'm going to go with running back Ty Chandler. Now, you know how I feel about this guy, Steve. I liked him when he finally got his chance with Minnesota. Really liked his explosiveness. Then you see Alexander Madison get shipped out of town. You think it's finally going to be Ty Chandler's season. And then what do you know? They sign Aaron Jones. And he's going to be I'm expecting Aaron Jones to be the leader of the backfield. And like Ty Chandler, he can also catch the ball out of the backfield and be in that receiving game. Aaron Jones is a pretty explosive player. I know he's old, but he still has some explosiveness. But Ty Chandler still is young and has more explosiveness at this point in his career. But this definitely dampened my likeness of Ty Chandler this year.
Yeah, I mean, you bring in a very established veteran who we know still has juice. I mean, obviously he had a couple injuries last year, but when he was healthy on the field, Aaron Jones looked exceptionally great for fantasy and for real life NFL. He was really, really good for that offense. He's a great work in the receiving game and the running game. And I think Ty Chandler will definitely have a role. Aaron Jones is, at under 210 pounds. He's not built for a workhorse role. He never really had that in Green Bay. There was always Jamal Williams and A.J. Dillon in his way as a grinder running back. And I think Ty Chandler might take that role a little bit. He's a little bit of a bigger back. He can take that workload in between the tackles a little bit more. And Aaron Jones to be able to get a lot in open space and have a really good season. So I'm excited for Jones. And obviously, Chandler's a loser, but just watch out. He'll still have a role. And if Aaron Jones ever goes down, Chandler has a very expanded role. So I will keep an eye on him in drafts for
I gotta give you credit here, Joe, because early on you said Ty Chandler is the best running back in that backfield. You were saying that, during the Madison hype, everything else, you were saying Ty Chandler is the best running back. You nailed that one. But now that Aaron Jones comes in, you saw what he was able to do in the playoff stretch with the Packers. I mean, he single-handedly helped beat the Cowboys for that team. I mean, he just was so disruptive. I think even though he is an older running back, he signed a one-year deal, I think, I don't know about from a dynasty perspective per se, but at least for the interim, he's going to be good next year. I don't see, unfortunately for Ty Chandler, I believe he's entering his third year. So now we're looking at maybe one more year and then, poof, there he goes. So I would say ultimately it makes sense.
Yeah, I do agree with Hutch, though. I mean, it's very possible that Aaron Jones goes down. And if so, Ty Chandler is still going to have that role that I was excited for in the intern. So I think he's still a valuable guy to take in your drafts.
So I'll talk about another running back, guys, and it's going to be running back A.J. Dillon. He's going to be 26 years old for the upcoming season. He signed a one-year contract, $2.74 million, to go back to the Green Bay Packers. The former second-round pick, he had a slow start in his career, and we were hoping he'd be some sort of a late bloomer, a la Derrick Henry. However, I think those hopes are dashed. Not only have the Packers signed Josh Jacobs, who's a physical running back in his own right, but Dillon honestly really hasn't been all that impressive. In 10 games without Aaron Jones, Dillon averaged 12.8 carries for 48.1 yards and only scored one touchdown. I was really hoping he'd go somewhere, but I think I'm completely out on Dylan from here on out.
No, it's just he's done because when you look at Dylan, it's not that he re-signed on the first day or the second day with the Green Bay Packers. It took a while for him to get a contract, which means he was probably looking out there saying, "Hey, anyone want to sign me?" And then it was like that meme, "Who want me?" And everyone's 100% no. Like it's just like no one wanted AJ Dillon, so he came back to the Packers on like a $2.5 million deal. It's just very clear that AJ Dillon is just not a super talented back, and the Packers brought him back on a cheap deal just to back up Josh Jacobs. So he is completely dead for fantasy. It's just how it is. If he gets injured, if Josh Jacobs gets injured, maybe Dylan will have a role. But like you said, even in the games Aaron Jones was out, it just wasn't that great. So I think no matter what, we're not looking at Dylan as a good fantasy asset.
No. And then I got caught by this guy a couple of years ago expecting that big breakout like everyone else did to happen. Didn't happen. And then, this past year, he looked even worse. I mean, he was only getting
he's only gotten worse.
2 yards per carry, and just like he showed sometimes some juice, but then last year was just like nothing, and he went down super easy, even though he's a bigger back. So I'm out on him.
Yeah, when it comes down to football players, Joe, you like them, you then fall off, but I still hang on for way too long, and I should have let go when you let go, and that's what I should have done because, I had hopes for this guy. I had him as a handcuff for Aaron Jones, thought that he could do well, and boy, was I burned. He did absolutely nothing. So, yeah, I think apparently he did have other offers. I guess he liked the locker room or he liked the team or I don't know what it is. I thought I heard that there were some other offers he was considering, but elected to go back to the Packers. But I really was hoping he'd go to a different landing spot. Hopefully that would have made things a little bit more brighter for him. But onward we go. And Hutch, who's your last loser for free agency?
So my last loser free agency is another running back. We're going to keep the streak going alive here. I'm talking about Roschon Johnson. I mean, a lot of people hyped up Roschon Johnson this past year as a rookie. People thought eventually he could take over the backfield. It just didn't really come to fruition much. I mean, Deonta Foreman had a couple of good games in Chicago, and Khalil Herbert was always a little bit involved in the offense. But even when Roschon was mostly alone, he just wasn't really great, and he didn't really have much of an impact for the Bears offense. And now we're coming into this next year, Deonta Foreman's gone, and we're looking at Roschon and Khalil Herbert as the two backs, and we're like, hey, maybe Roschon will really have a role. This kid was talented behind Bijan Robinson in Texas. Maybe we got something here. And nope, they bring in DeAndre Swift on a 3-year, $24 million deal. And DeAndre Swift was a really good back in Philadelphia. He was a really good running back. People really just completely over-dramatized the end of the Eagles season because it was that bad. I mean, I watched it as an Eagles fan every week, and it was just abysmal how bad their offense played. They didn't run the football. They couldn't do anything on offense. It was just so unbelievably boring. It was horrific. But in the first 12 weeks of the season, people forget DeAndre Swift was an RB1 in fantasy. And he was averaging, 18 plus carries a game. He was getting a ton of receiving work. Like this dude was legit a workhorse running back, and he was almost leading the running backs in touches in the first 12 weeks of the season. He was almost leading the running back. Almost leading all running backs in touches. He really was that dude. And now in Chicago, he's got a big money deal. And I'm thinking that he's going to be a really electric back. And I think he pairs really nice with Roschon Johnson, honestly. Roschon is a big bruiser kind of back that takes that dirty work in between the tackles. DeAndre Swift is somebody that's electric and that you want to get in a lot of space rather than give him 20 carries right up the middle every time. He's someone you want to give a lot of catches to. We saw seasons in Detroit where he was pacing for 60, 70 receptions. And in Philly, he had almost 40. And even in times where the offense wasn't working, this dude is just a legit player. And I cannot wait to see him with a rookie quarterback in Caleb Williams, who might be, dumping off a ton. Rookie quarterbacks who are developing love to have somebody's their best friend, either a tight end or a running back, someone to dump off to when they're under pressure. DeAndre Swift is that dude. DeAndre Swift can really help out there. So I'm excited for Swift in Chicago. And as a result, Roschon, just a pretty big loser. The upside is kind of gone.
Interesting you say that, Hutch. You're not going to be on with us for our free agency winners, but I think based on what you just said, I think I might know who one of them may be.
Yeah, Swift would be a winner for me. I mean, honestly, I would have loved it if Swift stayed at Philly. Like I really would have, but
he did better with Saquon. I think that
they did it better with Saquon, yeah. But with all the situations Swift could have gone to, I think Chicago was one of the better ones that he could have gone to.
I'm a little nervous about his injury, his durability. I think Roschon, correct me. I don't think Deonta Foreman is on the roster right now. I think it's
He's gone.
Rashawn Johnson and Khalil Herbert.
Yes,
so if there was no Herbert, I'd feel a little bit better for Johnson because you're going to want somebody in the event that Swift goes down. So I think he's a similar boat to me as Ty Chandler. I would say that, because I don't disagree with you guys what you said before. I think having him is good, but I don't think Rashawn Johnson is going to emerge on the scene by any means. And that contract that Swift got shows you that, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I agree. Khalil Herbert, Rashawn Johnson, those are definitely losers with Swift coming over here in this backfield. No doubt about it. But one thing you thought was interesting, you really think Caleb Williams is going to dump it off a lot with his ability to his mobility and his ability to run, scramble, and everything? Because normally, guys that have the ability to run don't dump it off as much.
Oh yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility that he just doesn't dump it off. But we saw Jalen Hurts give he gave the running back position over 90 targets this past year, and Swift saw a ton of them. Swift saw a lot of them, and Jalen Hurts we know is a great running quarterback in the NFL. Patrick Mahomes, he takes advantage of those dump offs when he can. He can scramble, he can run, but he takes advantage of those dump offs when he can. I think that Caleb Williams specifically, not just his athleticism. If it was third year, fourth year Caleb Williams, I think I'd be talking a little bit differently. But specifically that it's rookie Caleb Williams, because he's just going to be looking to get rid of the football before he gets sacked by a 300-pound lineman as fast as he can. I guess, a rookie developing in the NFL, while I think he could have a great season, a rookie developing in the NFL is still a rookie developing in the NFL, and you're going to be looking for some safe options, and DeAndre Swift is just as safe as you can get with a receiving running back. So I think while obviously he will take off at times with his athleticism, I think there will be opportunities for DeAndre Swift to catch a bunch of passes. I would say at least 39 passes Swift catches this year, as long as he remains pretty healthy.
So, Joe, who do you got as your final free agency loser?
Yeah, I'm going to stay in Chicago and going to go with tight end Cole Kmet.
That's a good one.
Just as him and Justin Fields get on the same page and get on a good rapport, they ship him out of town, and they're obviously going to have Caleb Williams taking over here. But, Cole Kmet also paid dividends, being that he was really the only other reliable option in the offense outside of DJ Moore. Now they bring Keenan Allen. They also bring Gerald Everett in the tight end room as well. And then, Hutch mentions the acquisition, bringing in DeAndre Swift as well. But Kmet's coming off, his best year. He actually had 90 targets, 73 catches for 719 yards and 6 touchdowns.
And they paid him a bag, too. They gave him a bag.
That's the thing, man. Gave him a 3-year deal, as well, and gave him a bag. And then now all this happens, and expecting his role in the offense to kind of decrease here. And I think he's a loser.
I would agree completely. When you add, because the thing is, you have a rookie, specifically for this year, you have a rookie quarterback coming in. I know C.J. Stroud did amazing things, but rookie quarterbacks tend to not be as great for the receiving options as, a veteran in the NFL. Rookie quarterbacks just tend to not be great for the receiving options. And I just don't think that we're going to see Caleb Williams be able to provide fantasy relevance for DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Cole Kmet on a consistent basis. And between Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, and Cole Kmet's great, but he's just the clear not as talented player as those other two. It's just very clear. Cole Kmet's great, man, but he is just not those two players. Those two are difference makers. He is just not. So Kmet is going to be the odd man out here when you look at that trio in the receiving game. And Gerald Everett, too. I think it's understated how much of an impact he has. He's a really good tight end. I think he's extremely underrated. And I would say he's not as good as Cole Kmet, but he's a very underrated tight end. I think he actually will have an impact to his role.
So you guys both mentioned Gerald Everett. And I think there's an interesting wrinkle that I saw that I do think is helpful to
Shane Waldron.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. New offensive coordinator for the Chicago Bears, was with the Rams staff when Gerald Everett was there. They basically have been with each other every step of the way, it seemed like, from what I could tell. So good and well that Gerald Everett is going to be used in that offense, and guess who's going to be used less? Cole Kmet. So I've never been high on him to begin with. You weren't either, but yeah, you kind of started to like him a little bit more because he was ascending. But yeah, I'm with you on this one, Joe. I think that is a loser for sure.
Yeah, and Gerald Everett, I agree. He's an underrated guy. Just was underutilized with the Chargers these last few seasons, but I do think he's a really good tight end, and it'll be interesting to see how they ultimately, use him, and Shane Waldron chooses to use him in his offense.
All right, guys, my last free agency loser here is wide receiver Jordan Addison. And one of the bigger moves in free agency, we saw Kirk Cousins leave the Vikings to sign with the Falcons. The Vikings' contingency plan now rests on Sam Darnold's shoulders, the former USC first-round pick. I know. There's a possibility that they're going to trade up and get a rookie quarterback. I'm with you. But who is it going to be? Is it going to be J.J. McCarthy? Is it going to be Drake May? Or is Drake May going to take some time to develop? Who knows? In the 10 games that Addison played with Jefferson, he averaged 3.5 catches, 47.4 yards, and scored a total of 6 touchdowns. In the 7 games without Jefferson, much better, 5 catches, 62 yards, and a total of 4 touchdowns. In the games Jefferson returned from injury, he was wide receiver 66, 119, 64, and 21. That's when they were looking at guys like Jaron Hall and Nick Mullins throwing the ball. Obviously, the huge debate you have right now in Dynasty, you've got Chase, you've got Jefferson. People say, well, Jefferson's quarterback proof. But are we going to say that Jefferson's quarterback proof and Addison's quarterback proof and Hutchinson's quarterback proof? At some point, there's got to be a draw of the line. So for me, I think that he is going to be the one affected the most by the lack of strong quarterback play in Kirk Cousins.
I like it. I like that take a lot. When I saw that name come up on the list, on our Twitter chat, those are really, really good. When Addison's just been a player I've never been a huge fan of. I mean, he just has the ceiling just isn't really there for him. And you mentioned last year when Jefferson was actually on the field, he just wasn't that dude. He really just wasn't relevant to the offense much at all. And especially now that they lose Kirk Cousins, who was, in the first few games of the season, and even last year too, dude was putting up legit crazy numbers. And he was a top 6 quarterback in fantasy last year. And 2 years ago and this past year before his injury, he was just on a ridiculous pace. And still, Jordan Addison with Justin Jefferson, T.J. Hawkins on the field couldn't do much. So I agree. It's weird to expect him to do anything much more than what he was doing last year when Jefferson and Hawkinson are on the field and they have a much worse quarterback.
Yeah, I agree with you, Steve. I agree. Justin Jefferson is quarterback proof, but you can't say that the other two, lump in Hutchinson and Addison are quarterback proof as well. Especially if J.J. McCarthy is the quarterback that they end up going with. He doesn't necessarily throw it down the field a ton. He can, but he just hasn't in college. But that's really where Jordan Addison excels, is those big plays down the field. And if those aren't there for him, I'd be concerned about him.
So that does it for our free agency losers for Dynasty Fantasy Football. Hutch, thanks so much for joining the show today. Where can others find your great work?
Oh, you all can follow me on Twitter at HutchinsonB_FF, and you can find me on Hooked on Fantasy. Me and Luke Sawhook host that podcast, and then I'm a worker. I work with DLF. I'm a podcast editor for them, and then I'm also working with Footballguys. I'm a big content creator for them as well.
Awesome.
Appreciate you having me on the show. Thank you.
Appreciate you coming
definitely. On. Yeah, you're welcome. It was great getting to know you over at the Fantasy Football Expo, and nice to bring you on. So it's always fun to talk free agency. We'll be back tomorrow talking about free agency winners, on a more bright note.
Yes.
Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.